This is why people vote for Trump. They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders, and that they were going to stop fumbling around with children's privates, because that's Prince Andrew's.
For years, the woke left have idolized Canada as their perfect liberal paradise, a snowy wonderland they insist America should emulate. But not everyone is sipping that maple-flavored Kool-Aid, and Bill Maher certainly isn't one of them. In a fiery episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, he shredded that rosy Canadian myth with a blistering, no-holds-barred monologue. Brace yourself. This one hits hard.
It was where every woke white college kid wearing pajama pants outdoors who'd had it up to here with America's racist patriarchy dreamt of living someday. I mean, besides Gaza. There's only one problem with thinking everything's better in Canada. It's not. Not anymore, anyway. Last year, Canada added 1.3 million people, which is a lot in 1 year, the equivalent of the U.S. adding 11 million migrants in 1 year. And now they're experiencing a housing crisis even worse than ours. And we're sleeping in tents.
Right out of the gate, Maher dismantles the woke left's rose-tinted fantasies about Canada. First, Target, the country's housing catastrophe, a crisis supercharged by open-border immigration policies that America's progressives worship like a sacred blueprint. In reality, Canada is staring down a brutal 3.5 million unit housing shortfall by 2030, a deficit so massive it makes California look like a homeowner's dream. To make matters worse, more than 1 in 5 Canadian households are already spending over 30% of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. Yet, the woke faithful keep holding up Canada as some sort of utopia. Maher doesn't just mock that illusion, he burns it to ashes.
The median price of a home here is $346,000. In Canada, converted to US dollars, it's $487,000. If Barbie moved to Winnipeg, she wouldn't be able to afford her dream house, and Ken would be working at Tim Hortons.
Housing in Canada is brutally expensive, and the numbers alone are just. The average home runs between $500,000 and $540,000, while in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, prices easily soar past $750,000 and often break the $1 million mark without hesitation. Compare that to the US, where the average home costs around $350,000 to $400,000. And suddenly, Canada's so-called paradise doesn't look so perfect. The woke left keeps preaching about copying Canada's grand model. But let's be honest, most of them are already struggling to stay afloat in America. Now imagine slapping Canadian-level housing prices on top of that. That's not building a utopia. That's writing an eviction notice for half the nation. Maher's point couldn't be clearer. If America copies Canada, it won't gain affordable living. It'll lose the keys to its own front door.
Because of mortgage debt, Canada has the highest debt-to-GDP ratio of any G7 nation. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. So does their vaunted healthcare system, which ranks dead last among high-income countries in access to primary healthcare and ability to see a doctor in a day or two. And it's not for lack of spending. Of the 30 countries with universal coverage, Canada spends over 13% of its economy on it, which is a lot of money for free health.
Canada's problems are turning out to be far bigger than the liberal cheerleaders ever imagined, and the cracks in their so-called utopia are spreading faster than they'd like to admit. What makes this even more striking is that Bill Maher isn't some conservative firebrand. He's a lifelong liberal, once proudly embraced by the very crowd he's now criticizing. That's exactly why his words cut so deep. If someone like Maher is taking aim at Canada, the fantasy isn't just cracked, it's completely shattered. But here's the real twist. Maher isn't ranting for shock value. He's drawing a comparison, holding up a mirror to America with that trademark smirk, and asking, is this really the model you want to follow? Because if Canada's the blueprint, then America better brace itself for soaring housing costs, broken promises, and a long list of regrets. And make no mistake, Maher's just getting started.
I'm not saying Canada still isn't a great country. It is, but those aren't paradise numbers. If Canada was an apartment, the lead feature might be America adjacent. And if America was a rental car, Canada would be America or similar. And again, honestly, Canada, I'm not saying any of this because I enjoy it. I don't, because I've always enjoyed you. But I need to cite you as a cautionary tale to help my country. And the moral of that tale is, yes, you can move too far left. And when you do, you wind up pushing the people in the middle to the right.
Bill Maher, suddenly confessing to switching sides. Has he crossed over to the right? Not quite. What's happening is the natural outcome of drifting too deep into leftist fantasy. When the left becomes so extreme that even lifelong liberals can't recognize it anymore, the pendulum inevitably swings back. Many of these liberals aren't embracing conservatism out of loyalty. They're just waking up to the chaos around them. Take Joe Rogan, for example. Once the progressive poster boy for free thought, now smeared as right-wing simply for questioning woke orthodoxy. Or Elon Musk, a man who builds electric cars and rockets. Hardly a conservative resume, yet somehow labeled center-right because he refuses to play along with the narrative. Maher fits the same mold. He hasn't changed his values. It's the left that sprinted so far off the edge that anyone standing in the middle now looks conservative by comparison.
It's worst. Canada is what American voters think happens when there's no one putting a check on extreme wokeness. Like the saga of Canadian shop teacher Kayla Lemieux, whose pronouns are she, her, and those. Kayla is now back to being a guy named Kerry, but 2 years ago when they showed up to teach children, the progressive high school they taught at said that they, the school, not the person. Really, you couldn't have found another word. We were using that one. Anyway, okay. They were committed to a safe environment for gender expression. Safe for who? What about the children?
Honestly, this is what happens when society decides that everyone can invent their own pronouns, and the rest of us are forced to play along. The result? Pure confusion and chaos. Take, for instance, the students who couldn't even tell what gender their own teacher was anymore. One day, he walks in wearing a dress, demands to be treated as a woman, and insists everyone affirm the act. The next day, he's back to being a man, as if none of it ever happened. The students are left baffled, unsure who's standing in front of them. That's not education, that's theater. And not the kind that enlightens, but the kind that confuses and When identity shifts with every passing mood, clarity vanishes, and what's left is a tangled mess of contradictions no one can make sense of.
What about the equipment in that shop class? There was once a weirdo D-list movie producer in the 60s named Russ Maher, who made low-budget B movies like Faster Pussycat Kill Kill and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, always featuring women who look like this. His movies played in porn houses and were featured in Hustler and Playboy. Okay, fine, but who says no when it comes to huge, ridiculous... Save that for the kids.
And keep in mind, these examples of extreme wokeness aren't playing out in some distant social experiment. They're happening right next door in Canada, the very country American liberals are desperate to imitate. This is their supposed golden model, their shining beacon of progressive perfection. But peel back the glossy maple syrup layer, and the truth isn't so sweet. You'll find sky-high housing costs crushing families, identity politics spinning classrooms into confusion, and government policies that resemble social experiments more than real solutions. Yet the American left still looks north with dreamy eyes, convinced Canada has achieved some higher state of enlightenment. It's almost laughable, because if this is what utopia looks like, it's built on debt, dysfunction, and denial. Bill Maher's message couldn't be clearer. Before liberals demand, America, be more like Canada, maybe they should take a sober look at the reality. It's nothing like the fantasy they keep preaching.
This is why people vote for Trump. They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders, and that they were going to stop fumbling around with children's privates, because that's Prince Andrew's job.
Maher is absolutely right. Trump didn't rise out of nowhere. He won because millions of Americans, including centrists and disillusioned liberals, had finally had enough of the non-stop wave of wokeness flooding from the left. The Democratic National Committee had turned itself into a circus of identity politics, cancel culture, and virtue signaling, and people wanted off the ride. It wasn't just conservatives rolling their eyes. Moderates and independents were walking away. 2. Even young voters, the group Democrats thought they owned forever, were losing interest fast. They weren't inspired by trading free thought for ideological obedience. The DNC stopped feeling like a political movement and started feeling like a classroom scolding. But Americans don't vote for lectures, they vote for leadership. And when the left failed to offer it, they didn't just lose the White House, they handed it to Donald Trump with a bow on top.
So too with all the other good place countries, in direct opposition to America's choice to affirm children's wishes on switching gender, no matter the age or psychiatric history. The far left, which always like to use, well, Europe does it. Yeah, no, that doesn't work on this one anymore.
Here's the irony. The woke crowd refuses to face many of the very countries they idolize as models for America don't even support gender-affirming care for minors. In fact, several have rejected it outright. Nations like Sweden, Finland, and the UK, all celebrated as progressive havens, have rolled back or heavily restricted medical transitioning for children, citing serious long-term risks and insufficient evidence. Some have even banned it altogether until individuals reach adulthood. These governments examined the data, considered the consequences, and concluded that safeguarding children outweighs appeasing activists. Meanwhile, in America, the left continues to champion these procedures as the height of progress, pretending the rest of the world is marching in unison. Spoiler alert, they aren't. Even the so-called enlightened nations know better than to gamble with children's futures for the sake of ideology.
On immigration, Sweden opened its borders to over 1.5 million immigrants since 2010, and now 20% of its citizens are foreign-born, and its education system is tanking, and it has Europe's highest rate of gangland killings. And one result is that the far-right parties are in the government now there for the first time. To which liberals say blaming immigrants for the rising crime rate is racist. Yeah, but is it true? Of course it's true. It's not a coincidence the quality of life went down after the Somali gangs started a drug turf war using hand grenades. Calling it racist doesn't solve the problem. It hands future elections to someone who will solve the problem and who, I promise, you're not going to like.
Absolutely. Throwing open the borders to anyone who feels like walking in isn't compassion. It's recklessness disguised as virtue. And the consequences are all around us. Under Biden's watch, fentanyl smuggling and usage have exploded, flooding communities with one of the deadliest substances on earth. This isn't about minor policy missteps, it's about an epidemic that's ripping families apart, destroying neighborhoods, and robbing an entire generation of its future. The numbers are shocking, but the heartbreak behind them is even worse. Ordinary Americans who once lived in peace and stability are now paying the price for reckless border policies. The left may call it compassion, but what kind of compassion leaves children overdosing in school bathrooms or parents burying their kids far too soon? Maher's point couldn't be clearer. If America can't control its borders, it can't protect its people, and without protection, there's no peace, only chaos disguised as policy. In the end, Maher's takedown of Canada and the radical left isn't just comedy, it's a wake-up call. From housing crises and gender confusion to border collapse and the fentanyl nightmare, the progressive utopia crumbles under its own hypocrisy. America doesn't need Canada's blueprint, it needs sanity, leadership, and a return to reality. That wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more hard-hitting political commentary. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.